Okay, so I'm talking to Charlie Davies, who is the CEO of TravelTime. And so, Charlie, the big headline here, as far as you're concerned, is that only 3% of real estate portals around the world allow their users to search by travel time. Is that surprising at all to you?
Not from a global perspective, no. I mean, we started our life as a company in the UK. We have about 90% of the property market in the UK, and we're expanding that out now across Europe and the US, where we have some significant brands using our technology already. And our aim for 2024 and beyond is to significantly lift that 3% as high as we can possibly get it.
Okay, and just for the audience, who do you work with? Any big names that we'd recognize?
In the UK, we've got Zoopla on the market, Rightmove, and then across the States we're with CoStar, who have a number of different brands underneath them. In fact, we've seen the acquisition of On the Market by CoStar recently in the UK, and we see this quite regularly across all the verticals that we operate in. Is that there tends to be sometimes many different portals or many different players, but they tend to also be owned by bigger conglomerates or umbrella companies above.
Okay. So I want to talk a bit about this. So this is a map of the different portals around the world that let their users search by, some kind of tool that lets users search by travel time. And I mean, we've got a few, there's one in China, there's a couple in Japan, but the major one was France. There are 4 in the moment in France that let users search by travel time. And it seems to me that what happens is when one of the major portals gets this tool, the others kind of get a bit jealous. They look over the fence and they get it themselves. Is that what you've seen as well?
Yeah, I think it's also useful to take a step back and think like, well, why search by time? And obviously, all of these sites are constantly iterating through lots of different changes that they can make in order to improve the performance of their site, mainly down to conversions. And conversions can mean different things to different sites, but majoritively of applying to go and view or register with a property or a realtor or estate agent, as we call them in the UK. One of the things that we saw significantly with Zoopla was this 300% uplift in conversions, which is a significant improvement to the operation of their applications. What we're trying to do at TravelTime is not just have a view of searching by time. And what I mean by that is that and you'll see some of our brands doing this already, is it's not just about having the results that are coming out of the existing database and then looking at those results through the prism of time. So is having that original list and saying, right, what's the travel times each of these? It's about actually putting the intelligence of travel time in the core of the database that they're using. This is significantly different because you can actually just remove distance completely, only operate on the travel time and the mode of transport that are unique and important for the personalization of that individual search, and return completely relevant results, not just on the listing view, but then inside the detail view as well, when you're seeing things like POI data and other significant results coming back. Beyond that as well, that can also be in the longer tail. So for marketing efforts in terms of sending out, there's new properties available to you, because we know that a significant proportion of traffic for these sites comes from those long tail emails or organic from SEO traffic generation. So there's a number of different ways that it can be incorporated to make sure that it's not just a nice to have, but it's fundamentally improving the metrics in their business.
Okay. It's definitely a feature that me as a user, having looked through all of these real estate portal websites, I really like it. I imagine users everywhere really like it. What are the barriers holding back adoption? So I imagine you've got 2 big barriers for adoption here. I imagine one of them is kind of API costs. I imagine for every time a user searches using travel time, there's an API cost involved. And I imagine the other one is probably countries or markets that don't have great public transport data or great traffic data and that sort of thing. Would that be
they're 2 incredibly valid points for the rollout of what TravelTime is trying to do. On the first one, on cost, we have experienced and gone through many different pricing models around how we go price what we do. The one that we have found that significantly helps our customers, 1, understand, and 2, deploy without fear, is actually not charging for every single API call that that happens. We actually charge on rate limits. So basically just the amount of requests that you can make in a given minute. And that pretty much reflects the size of the portal, right? If you've got a very big portal, your rate limit's going to be much higher because you've got the amount of users using it at any one time. A lower one would obviously have lower. And we fix these costs, right? So there's no overage cost. There's no hidden fees in there. There's no sort of weird bill that comes out at the end. It's a fixed agreed amount every month. And that's because every time someone does a search on one of these sites, it's not linked directly to revenue. You know, a person might do multiple searches before actually, you know, leaving an inquiry. And if you're a site that's paying every time someone's doing that, you're going to be nervous and scared about the increased cost in order for you then to deliver the ROI on it for having that feature installed. And as you can imagine, you know, some of these sites have hundreds of thousands of properties and millions of users. And as you start multiplying either side of that up together, the costs are just going to be extraordinarily high. And that also then comes from performance as well. We allow inside of those API calls to us hundreds of thousands of locations. So you can do these searches in, you know, under 120 milliseconds. So there's no extra infrastructure cost for the customer, also for the portals, and for the users. They don't see any difference in terms of performance, because if there was any performance degradation, it would just lose any value we were giving anyway. So that to understand exactly how the business model works for those property portals is super important, to make sure there's a realistic approach to costing it and pricing it back out. Your second point around public transport coverage or coverage of any mode of transport. I mean, we've spent an awfully long time building our own teams who are then building and collecting and gathering lots of different traffic or public transport data out there. Actually, we're one of the world's biggest public transport databases out there, because we've actually gone and built all of this data ourselves to make sure that, one, we understand it and that we can control it and make sure it's making sense for our customers. For example, you know, when we work with real estate analytic companies, they want to know exactly what everything's going to be happening at 9:30 in the morning. But for a user coming onto a site for the first time, they just want to know what's the average sort of time in the morning or in the afternoon. They don't want to know a fixed time of day. So it's very important that we understand all of that data properly. We can deliver it at great speed and at a great price for our customers, but one that also immediately reflects what their users are expecting from a feature like that as well. There's also, you know, regardless of whether the data exists, if you look at maps of our public transit coverage maps of the US, visually they look quite sporadic, because the US is massive and the public transport isn't as great coverage, for example, as the UK or France or Germany. So we then have to really focus back in on, you know, where that public transit coverage is, and then how we can supplement it. So our models are able to do, you know, driving and public transport. And we saw a big change actually, you know, post-COVID. And, you know, you only have to, you know, go on LinkedIn or go on a news website to try and figure out what everyone's still thinking about working from home or going into the office. And we actually saw people who were much more willing to commute further, so, you know, plus 2 hours, but only do that twice a week, which really changed the landscape, where your work life and your home life don't have to be as close together by that commute time anymore, because you're not doing it every single day. But doing it twice a week, you might be more willing to take a 2-hour train journey on a Tuesday and a Thursday, for example. And that's, again, just us constantly having to make sure that our product is keeping up with the trends, as well as delivering the performance over that. Because as you can imagine, doing those large scale searches is much more complex than doing, you know, what's within 10 minutes versus what's within 3 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point about COVID and, you know, maybe only going to the office twice a week, changing people's habits. I wanted to pick up this slide a little bit, because I think just generally in the world of real estate portals, the next big thing for a while has been, where is the listing in relation to points of interest, right? Now, obviously, the cutting edge of that is searching by travel time, you know, the user inputting a location and a desired number of minutes to get there, right? But there are a lot of portals that, although they haven't quite got there yet, they're doing something kind of similar. So they're allowing the user to put in an address and then maybe a distance, or they're at least putting points of interest on their listing page with distances. It's definitely the direction of travel for the industry. As you can see, so we saw only 3% actually allow users to search by the time, 12% allow them to search by the distance. Do you think maybe in 2 years we'll see, I mean, what do you think the adoption is going to be going from searching by distance to searching by time? Do you think we'll see a big percentage shift if we do this again in 2 years?
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing that already, but I think it's also important to think, well, why? And it's, you know, when a user goes onto a site, in their mind, they're probably not thinking, oh, I'm going to use this site because it's got POI data, or I'm going to use this site because it's got travel time data. It's about creating a search, whether that's, you know, a search that's happening with a user interacting with that application, whether that's on, you know, big web or on mobile. And obviously, as I said earlier on, in that longer tail of getting notifications. And I think there is so much more personalization that can happen inside of those property searches, where the POI data isn't about selecting, you know, sometimes you have a tick box of, you know, I want to see the gyms or the schools or restaurants. Is actually using that POI data in a combination of understanding where work address and obviously where possibly home could be, giving the results to individuals and saying, hey, you should look at this property because it fits your profile. At the moment, a lot of that work and effort is still put back onto the user, where they have to scroll down, you know, see the POI data. And then the reason you're seeing, you know, some of those like put your address in is because that's a way of them controlling the cost of the API usage that they're using elsewhere. It's saying, we see the value of it, but it's going to cost us every time. We want some commitment from the user to understand it. Whereas with TravelTime, they're able to do all of that calculation either up front or on the fly to make sure that the best possible result is delivered to that individual. The most relevant result is delivered to that individual. And if we can improve that relevancy in that search experience, we have proven that then we can help increase those conversions. And I sort of have that gap there between the relevancy and the conversion, because it can mean very different things to different sites. I mean, we see that even in the UK, how our bigger customers actually appreciate and concern themselves with what a conversion is. So it's important that our technology fits into what they're already trying to do, have that more personalized search, deliver more relevant results, without asking them to completely change how their site looks or say it's got to look the specific way because that's the only way it will work. It's about making sure our technology can fit into very quickly what they're already doing.
Okay, and last question from me. Am I right in thinking you guys work with other verticals as well, with jobs and kind of not just property portals, but with lots of other websites and customers and things like that, right? So my big
100%.
kind of
yeah.
My big kind of bugbear with all of this. So, I mean, we're just looking at one section of the report now, which is the travel, you know, the uptake of travel time search. But if we look at, you know, just for example, things like even mapping listings and, you know, things that we might think of as basic, like keyword search, it's still really low. And the adoption among real estate portals is like, it's really, really slow. So I wanted to show this slide down here. My kind of bugbear with the whole industry is that it seems to take them ages as an industry to, you know, use this new technology on their websites. This is actually an example from, of all places, Papua New Guinea, where they've got on their listing, not on their, you know, on their search page, but on their listing pages, they've got travel times in there. So my kind of point here is there's no excuse really. If you can do it in Papua New Guinea, you can do it anywhere. Have you seen in other, maybe other verticals, other kind of companies, have they kind of taken up this technology a bit quicker than the real estate portal world?
Yeah, I think we started life, our first customers were in property because property always lent itself to map views. You know, I think every portal has a map of some sort. And maps are great.
You'd like to think that. You would like to think that. Maybe they do in some countries, but like here it's still only about 70%, 75% that have a map.
But I think, you know, the majority of the sort of bigger players will have a map view to sort of contextualize a result, right? And maps are really good for that. I mean, I've actually got a map above my screen, so every time I mention the word map, I have to sort of look up. But they're very, very good for contextualizing a result. And when you know an area, and I live in London, so I'll use London, but, you know, you see the Thames and you know where you are, and you very easily, you know, contextualize that and go, right, I sort of know where that is. But most maps actually provide more confusion than help. and they provide more confusion than help because they actually switch the views, right? So you're in the detailed listing, you're looking at the photos, the other data that you want to see, and then you've got to go into this big map view and then switch back again. And the reason for that is that the map views are fairly cheap to sort of serve up as a map tile, but to then put the other data there has been beforehand prohibitively too expensive. What TravelTime enables our customers to do is sort of put that data back into the search results themselves. So not even having to use the map at all. We had that to begin with that isochrone, feature. So you could see, that point in polygon, what's in there, what isn't. And we quickly found that although that's useful, it's not as useful as it can be. And what the massive thing for us was being able to calculate hundreds of thousands of locations, so actual lat longs or addresses, in sub 120 milliseconds. Now, that opened us up to lots of other verticals. And the other big one that we've seen significant growth in is in recruitment, which is the other side of this life decision search, shall we say. So we've seen that in, shift matching, understanding where someone could have that job or where they need to be to go for that shift, for example. We've seen big increases in those markets, but we've also seen increases in healthcare. We actually, in the UK, we powered the COVID search for getting a test, and we now moved that into the 999 or directory of services. So if you call an ambulance, or you need a pharmacy, or you interact with anything with the NHS, it's us in the background matching that together so that you get the best result for that time of day, depending what's open, what's available, what ambulance is available, like that. They're the sort of two other ones we've seen significant increases in, but we work across lots of other ones as well, like travel, ad networks, making sure that ads are coming in at the same time. They're all similar in the concept that they're trying to match two things together, where location is either part of that decision or buying making process. And because we had the challenge of solving that for property, we've then been able to take that exact same solution and use it elsewhere. And it's because we never actually, we were very, very strict with ourselves that we didn't want to have a specific API for one specific vertical. And the reason for that is because all of these sites, as you see, they care massively about the control that they have over them. And they want to make sure that when they're using an API, they can use the parts they want from it, but display it in the way they need to do it. Not in a way that they say, hey, it has to look this way. It's going to look exactly the same as everyone else's. We were very, very strict with ourselves around that. Now, that was great for us to, do what we did in the UK property market and beyond. It's also been fundamental that our technology is now able to be used in lots of different verticals and lots of territories. We're now completely global on this API. So your question back to how, the public transport stuff, that problem just keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But because we have that base control of it, we're able to expand and grow at the rate we are.
Okay. Well, Charlie, it's been interesting, honestly. I had no idea that you guys powered 999 services. That's pretty great. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for
It's not something that we set out to do, but we're very proud of it. So yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Hopefully, if we do this again in 2 years, we'll see some of these percentages go up considerably. And yeah, we'll get you back on to talk about it, hopefully.
It would be my absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for your time, Edmund, and everything that you guys do. We've loved working with you.
Cheers. Thank you.